Joining me now to discuss the possible indictment and arrest of former President Trump is Joe Walsh, a former Republican congressman, also a former presidential candidate, now host of the White Flag podcast. Joe, thanks so much for joining me. As always, really appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Wyatt.
Let's just start out with the possible indictment of former President Trump, whether or not you even think that's going to happen and what that might mean if it does.
I think it probably will happen. I think this will probably be the first of a few arrests, indictments of the former president this year. And it portends 2 years of utter chaos in this country. I think the arrest will help Trump within the Republican Party. That I think is pretty clear.
And what does that say, though, about the Republicans that, him getting potentially indicted or arrested might help him amongst his base?
Well, it says that this party is still Donald Trump's party. I never doubted that, Wyatt. There were a lot of people, especially after the midterms, who were hoping and praying that Republicans would move away from Trump. But I talk to Republican voters every day, and he has a solid lock on a decent percentage of them. And remember, Trump's image has always been that he's the victim. He's the great victim. So here you go again with, the deep state going after him. That plays to his followers.
And when you look at what his opponents in this race are saying in regards to potential opponents, you don't really have many of them actually coming out and publicly saying anything. Nikki Haley, I don't believe has said anything, at least of substance. You do have people like Ron DeSantis, though, the Florida governor, who hasn't officially entered the race, but potentially will be, who has, made some brief comments on it. What would it mean for them if, this were to happen?
They have to be really careful, Wyatt. Here's the problem for anybody running against Trump this year. None of his opponents can criticize Trump because they don't want to turn off Trump's supporters. They want Trump supporters. So you've got this very weird dynamic where Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Mike Pence and all the others are being as careful as they can be not to criticize him. I think that's almost an impossible road to take, though.
And you mentioned that you think this would be probably earlier on, that this would probably be the first of many indictments of the former president. This one specifically in regards to Stormy Daniels, but you also see that, there are many other issues that the former president is involved in. For example, his role on January 6th, et cetera. What might those other issues that he played a fairly significant role in mean as to, his potential bid for the White House once again?
Well, and why that's the odd thing about this potential arrest. This one in New York is really the least important, and it may be the most difficult to prove. Look, we're talking about a former president who incited an attack on our Capitol. I would hope and expect he'd be indicted for that. We're talking, Wyatt, about a former president who called the top election official in the state of Georgia and pressured him to overturn the election results in Georgia. I expect him to be indicted for that. Those are two much more serious charges.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Former Republican congressman and former presidential candidate Joe Walsh. Joe, as always, thanks so much.
Great to be with you, Wyatt.